Today on Law Next, my guest is Neil Arajo, the CEO and co-founder of iManage. Neil was last on this show almost exactly 2 years ago, and in the dog years of AI, that feels like a long time ago. Our conversation then was about firms still feeling their way around generative AI. But as you'll hear today, the focus now is about what it actually takes to put AI to work at scale. And iManage's answer to that is that it starts with what Neil calls a knowledge foundation, a content, context, and governance layer that makes AI responses not just fluent, but relevant and trustworthy. Today we'll talk about iManage's new context fabric, the launch of its MCP server, the rapid evolution of its Ask iManage product, and where Neil sees the legal industry heading as AI moves from experimentation to operational reality. As for me, I am Bob Ambrogi, and the show is Law Next, a podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to any of that, please take a moment to hear from the sponsors who so generously support this podcast. Your specialized law practice deserves specialized software. Meriscase is the legal practice management solution built exclusively for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms. Every feature, from intelligent document management to precision time tracking and seamless payment reconciliation, is designed around how you actually work. Stop adapting to generic software and start experiencing what true practice management could be. Transform your firm's efficiency at meriscase.com. That's MERUSCASE.com. Now let's get to today's conversation with Neil Arajo. Neil, welcome back to Law Next.
Thanks for having me again, Bob. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, and even better to see you off the conference circuit. We're usually talking at a conference somewhere, but it's great to be able to talk in a little more relaxed environment, perhaps. So you were on this show 2 years ago. It was April 2024, and we've probably come a long way since 2 years ago. It doesn't seem all that long ago in terms of calendar dates, but in terms of the way things have changed and evolved. And one of the things you said when you were on the show 2 years ago was that many of your customers were still kind of feeling their way around this world of AI and what it all means for their firms and their practices. So I'm wondering what your perspective is now on that. Is the legal industry evolving in its understanding of and adoption of generative AI?
I remember a few things about that conversation from a couple of years back. And I certainly think that the pace at which both the understanding, the learning, and the technology has moved is been incredible. If anything, just the velocity and the volume of change is mind-blowing. And I think the legal industry, a lot of folks are still in the sort of learning and experimental stage, but we've seen adoption, from how many people are actually using this technology, unlike anything we've probably experienced before. Not necessarily seen impact, which is, what is the economic impact of this technology? That's yet to be seen, but certainly a lot more in terms of adoption to tech.
Yeah, I don't want to age you or date you, but you've been in this industry for 30 years. Don't feel bad. I've been in it for just as long. You've seen a lot of change over those years. I mean, we've seen kind of the move to the cloud, the rise of document management of what your core business has been. The rise of knowledge management. A lot of people are talking about AI now as something that's far more transformational than anything the legal industry has ever seen before. Where do you put it? What's your perspective on, where this fits in terms of the significance in the evolution of legal practice?
Yeah, it's actually far more significant, not just in the evolution of legal, and it's far more significant in terms of evolution of humanity, if I can put it there. And it's because it has impact on the working practices. That is, how do you
Hmm.
actually get work done? It has implications for the business model. How do you charge, and how do you for the value you create? It has implications socially. What impact is it going to have on training and on jobs and the anxieties that go with it? So it's and typically when there's a big change like this, um, there's a rearrangement of supply and demand that happens. We've certainly seen an increase in demand. We've seen volume and velocity of change, that becomes a tailwind for us. We've also seen,
You say for us, you mean for iManage or
yeah,
for
for
the profession
iManage,
more
for
broad? Yeah,
iManage.
yeah, yeah.
But so you're going to see an increase in demand for legal services on one hand, because
Hmm.
businesses are getting more complex. That complexity law firms help. But on the other hand, you're going to see an increase in productivity. So there's going to be an increase in capacity of legal services. But the timing of those two things are not going to perfectly match up. And how you manage the transition is going to be interesting to watch. I hope as a society we do the right things and make sure that as we adopt these technologies, we also take care of our people, and be thoughtful about sort of the policies that bring the the world along, as this technology sort of embeds itself into the way we work and the way we operate.
What about for iManage itself? I mean, you were one of the original founders of iManage back 31 years ago. And obviously, the company has been through some changes, evolved in a number of ways. How have the developments of the last couple of years impacted kind of the direction of your company, the kind of the fundamental purpose even of your company? I know you just had your Connect Live conference in Chicago. You got another one coming up in London in a week or two. What's the message there in terms of what iManage is right now versus 5 years ago, say?
Sure. It's a very interesting question, because in some ways our purpose has not changed. And in some ways the manifestation of how our services are utilized is changing radically. And I'll explain what I mean by that. At the end of the day, what we've done in this industry is to provide a highly scalable, performant, reliable, secure content platform, and that content remains really important in improving the relevance of AI to your specific workflow, to your specific firm. But in addition to content, AI does a fantastic job when it has more context. How can I use this piece of content, and where is it relevant in a particular workflow? And LLMs have gotten very good at picking up signals in that context, that can improve the responses, and reduce the downside of some of the downsides of AI technologies. And then governance, which is another big element of what we do, which is how do you manage who can see what? How do you manage where you process a piece of information based on geographic jurisdiction or regulatory pressures? All of that becomes even more important in a world of agents. And then finally, we are already seeing this trend. The access to content was in the past an end user looking for documents, saving documents, bringing in emails, whatever it might be. And now you've got AI applications and agents that are doing the same thing. And so this, how we provide that connectivity in a performant and scalable way, is completely changed. So, in a way, what we do for the organization has been the same things: content, context, governance, access. The scale at which we do it, and the methods we use, have changed dramatically. So our message at the conference, has been, our view of sort of sustained, enduring use of AI is human-led, agent-supported, knowledge-driven. It's been an interesting couple of years to sort of actually execute on that vision.
Yeah. Well, you talked at the conference, and you had kind of teased this earlier in the year, but you kind of formally, I guess, unveiled what you're describing as kind of a context fabric within iManage, just to build on that concept of the importance of context as you were talking about. So, what do you mean by that? What is the context fabric, and why does that matter to your customers?
Sure. Well, context improves, I'd say relevant context improves the effectiveness of generative AI models significantly. It provides the model grounding on how to tailor the response to facts that are and patterns that are your IP, your work product. LLMs have gotten very good at improving their reasoning capabilities over the last 2 years. That's probably one of the biggest change. Going from text generation to reasoning, and reasoning is based on context. So to give you a very simple example, if I'm generating a clause or evaluating a particular clause, if I know the jurisdiction in which that clause was originally written, okay, it tells me whether that clause is still relevant law if I'm drafting the same agreement in a different jurisdiction. Finding just a precedent document is one thing, but finding one that's relevant to you in that jurisdiction is taking it a step further, and makes the output likely more ripe, more relevant to your specific situation.
So how do you extract that context? How do you provide that context from a collection of documents and whatever
Sure.
else?
Yeah, I'd say probably providing context and governance is probably the area we've invested in significantly over the last 2
Mhm.
years. And context is, some of it is extracted from the document itself. So we've written custom models. By we, I mean iManage have written custom models that can automatically read a document and determine what the governing law is, and can extract out interesting data points and then take those data points and make them available as part of the metadata of the document. But context is not just metadata. Context could be the activity, who has authored that document, okay, or who has worked on that document, where else has that document been used. All of those are interesting bits of information that ultimately determine whether that, something that has occurred in the past, a document that has been drafted in the past, is relevant grounding, for something new that you're developing. And making making that available in a scalable fashion, and doing it in an automated fashion is sort of where we've invested. The other thing that we've also done is, provided capabilities to curate documents that may be more interesting. Okay. So for example, if you've got a best practice library, and you know that if you're developing this specific type of agreement for a given jurisdiction, someone has said this is the gold standard. It helps an agent to say, okay, I'm picking something from a gold standard that's been managed and maintained, and how you manage all of that workflow, is capabilities that we provide. That is an example of context in a different form. And then we also link your documents to data that could be in other systems. So, for example, was this matter profitable? was this matter settled or did it go to trial? All of those pieces of information could be important when someone is looking for either a clause or a document that you worked on in the past. And we do that by linking into other systems that have that information and surfacing it, when you search for documents in iManage.
Almost right around the same time that you were announcing the sort of the context fabric, another major DMS company in the legal space, and documents started talking about the context graph. They sound very similar. Are they very similar? Are you both trying to do kind of the same thing here, you think?
I don't know. If I'm honest, I did see that come out like the weekend before our Connect Live release, but I really don't know the basis of it. I can tell you that sort of the underpinning of our what we call context is a highly reliable, scalable, performant platform, and I feel fairly confident that the work we've done over the last 10 years to build our cloud applications puts us miles ahead. We've seen evidence of that, just in the reliability of our platform, and the models we've built to analyze documents, because they're custom models. We can do it at a fraction of the cost that it will take if you use LLMs to extract out and classify those documents. I don't necessarily know technically how our competition is making that claim, but we've been working on this for several years. It's not like something that was dreamt up overnight.
Yeah, but it's clearly where you've taken this is kind of from your core is document management,
Mhm.
then adding on some AI features to really kind of transforming it into more of this concept of almost a knowledge foundation for AI and for AI agents, right? I mean, it's kind of it's a
That's
not
correct.
not a huge leap, but it's a significant leap in terms of your focus.
Yeah, and absolutely. How do we help our customers take their second most important asset, and that second most, because I think their people are their most important asset, and really unleash it, with the AI technologies that are emerging.
Yeah. For now, the people are the most important assets. Give it a few more years, right?
Yeah, I hope that never
I'm kidding.
changes.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't think that either. Um, so, something else that you've been talking about this year is that you had a really strong 2025 with significant customer growth. You had continued to have kind of strong migration to the cloud. How do you position that? I mean, what do you think accounts for that? Is a lot of this being driven by interest in generative AI, or are there kind of other factors at play here?
Certainly we've seen organizations recognize that, to scale the use of AI, or to have what I would call enduring, durable use of AI, you need to have a very strong knowledge foundation, and that's driven accelerated demand for us. We also, as I said earlier, our cloud platform is something that has been developed in the last several years. So it's using the most modern technology. We partnered with Microsoft and Azure to build that out. It is paying off in terms of its reliability, in terms of its performance. Our customer satisfaction is the best it's ever been as a result of that investment. So, we are taking market share from our competitor, and our sort of organizational structure, right, our corporate structure where, no debt, primarily management owned, allows us to take a long view of where the market is going. And particularly in a time of transition like this, or transformational transition like this, having the luxury to take a long view is something that has helped us build out the vision in the right way.
Yeah. The talk of the legal tech industry of late has been MCPs, the Model Context Protocol, developed by Anthropic that lets Claude connect to third-party applications, including iManage. In fact, iManage recently launched its own MCP server to enable integrations with products such as Claude, Harvey, Legora, and many others. When we return, I'm going to ask Neil about his thoughts on MCPs and what the trend means for legal professionals. But before we do that, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors who so generously support this podcast. If you're tired of making your specialized practice fit into generic legal software, it's time for Meriscase. Built specifically for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms, Meriscase delivers tailor-made features that understand your firm's unique challenges. With automated document workflows, templates, and custom fields, you'll cut through administrative chaos and gain a competitive edge. Join the growing number of specialized firms who've discovered the power of purpose-built software at Meriscase.com. That's MERUS case.com. Welcome back to Law Next, where I am speaking with Neil Araujo, the co-founder and CEO of iManage. As we get back to the conversation, we turn to the topic of MCPs and Anthropic's recent release of Claude for Legal. Let's get back to that. The phrase of the year may be MCP. Everybody's been talking about it in all different contexts. Most directly because of the Anthropic Claude press conference a few weeks ago, talking about Claude for the legal profession. But you had, I think, just earlier this month, announced your own MCP server, allowing you to connect with other third-party providers. So I guess first of all, kind of what's the thinking behind you launching your own MCP server? And I think you've also got your own Claude MCP connector going as well. So I mean, so focus on the launch of your MCP server. What's the sort of the strategy behind that? But then also more generally, what are your thoughts on all the conversations going on right now around MCP and Anthropic and what that all means for legal tech?
Yeah, look, the when we say it's our own MCP server, it's a service that we provide that allows for any MCP client, whether it's Claude or an AI native company or Copilot, to talk to iManage and leverage the content and context and the governance layer that is in iManage without writing a custom connector. So it allows customers effectively to leverage their second most important asset much more easily and reduces the friction, to making that happen. So we were part of the Claude announcement because we have MCP and we support MCP. It's allowed us to move much faster in developing integrations with any AI client that supports MCP.
Yeah. The Claude news in particular did seem to stir up some conversation that perhaps the frontier models are going to be encroaching into the legal tech space and perhaps in some cases posing a threat to the traditional legal tech vendor market. Do you buy that at all? What are your thoughts on that?
The technology stack in the legal industry, but for that matter in any industry, is in a state of flux, and exactly where this is going to land in a few years, I don't have a clue. But I just think that you are going to see frontier model providers move up the value chain. I think it helps them build greater differentiation, and the models themselves are significantly more capable now than they were, just a few months back. And so as that capability evolves and as the ambitions of the frontier model providers increases and it becomes easier to write code, that's another thing that's happened in the last year. You're going to see a lot of bouncing around of how does the customer ultimately get the job done. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that content foundation and the governance and the context, all of that becomes much harder to adopt, to scale, and to use in a sustainable way.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like any provider that has that knowledge foundation, whether it's a company such as yours that has the firm knowledge basically as a foundation, or whether it's something like a Thomson Reuters that has the legal data foundation that's pretty hard to replicate. I mean, it seems like those companies become more important, not less important, in the face of all of this.
I would agree. But, at the end of the day, what I look for is evidence that the customer is actually succeeding with what they're trying to do, and how we enabling them to succeed when the bar is not, hey, can I experiment with AI? It's, am I able to fundamentally change my delivery model? Am I able to, improve my value proposition to my clients? Am I able to offer a better value proposition to talent that's coming into the firm because of how I have assembled my technology stack and enable the firm to thrive in the era of AI?
Yeah. Something else I wanted to ask you about was Ask iManage, which you expanded significantly this year. Can you explain a little bit about what that what capability that provides for your clients, and how it's evolved, how it's expanded this year?
Sure. Yeah. So Ask I Manage is AI or LLM integration that's built into the DMS experience. So you don't have to leave the iManage Work 10 experience to do a tabular review, for example, a red line of a document against previous versions, or an analysis of a document compared to a playbook or compared to a precedent. That those are all examples of AI tasks that simply become, right click in iManage, through the use of our integration into LLMs. And that product has been evolving at a rapid pace. We have new capabilities come out literally monthly, that would have probably taken years in the past. There's one capability that has become extremely popular that we introduced late last year, and it's using LLMs to improve, or it's introducing agentic search in Ask iManage. And what that does is it takes your query, it uses LLM to interpret the query, translates that query into a set of searches in iManage, brings back the results, and gives the end user what the LLM believes are the most relevant. So you don't have to shuffle through 2,000 results, try and figure out which one is the right one for you. And it also takes your top results and gives you an answer. So if you were looking for, what's market, in the most recent SPAs that the firm has done in this particular industry, it'll get you those responses, and then it'll get you, an answer to your specific question. And it's been extremely popular because it's always been a pain point for our customers. How do I get to the right information quickly?
So it's making the decisions after you've asked the query as to where to go, and how to pull together the resources, the documents, whatever it would, that provide the answer to your query.
Yeah, yeah. So think of it as an agent that's going and doing multiple searches. It reads what it gets back. It may do another search if
Hmm.
it feels like, the results are not responsive to the original question, and then it takes, the final set and then summarizes the answer to the question for you. So you can use it, for example, what's market, for this particular clause. I use it, we deployed it internally to say, hey, what did Neil work on last week? And it does an amazing job of summarizing, what I've done and synthesizing it into a single paragraph.
Yeah. And then I think you mentioned this, but I think one of the other capabilities, I know you as a company were talking a lot about at Clock a couple of weeks ago at the Corporate Legal Operations
Hmm.
Consortium meeting, was the ability to do playbook analysis
Hmm.
using Ask iManage. And is that meant to be? I mean, is that become a substitute for other kinds of commercial contract review platforms that are out there?
Yeah, Bob, I'm not familiar with what those contract review platforms do, so it'd be unfair for me to sort of comment on that. What our capability does is it makes it very easy for you to develop a playbook. And a playbook is, if I'll use a simple example. If I get an NDA at iManage, I expect to see at least these 3 or 4 items, and
Mhm.
it will check an inbound NDA for those, and it'll give you a green, yellow, red for each one of those rules. And it simply reduces the time for that first pass review,
Mhm.
so that you can then triage it and send it to the appropriate parties depending on,
Yeah.
you know,
And will it create the
what
red
the
lines
gaps are.
based on that, or?
Yes, it can create red lines based on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what a lot of the commercial that's what a lot of the commercial contract review platforms do.
Yeah, and it can even
Yeah.
suggest language for if there's a gap. It'll actually suggest language based on precedents that you might have had in the
Uh-huh.
past.
Yeah, so that the customer can provide those
Yeah,
precedents
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it makes it
Uh,
easy for you to build the playbook. You can actually use AI to say, hey, what should my playbook have for this? And it'll give you a set of suggestions for
yeah.
what it believes based on looking at your history. For that type of document.
You've at least mentioned a lot the concept of governance and reliability as kind of core differentiators for iManage. I mean, I wonder if you can talk about uh, uh, eh, any advancements in that regard for iManage over the past year. I mean, what are customers looking for? What are you providing in terms of security and governance permissions and all of that?
Sure. Security is paramount for the kind of workloads that we provide. Governance has traditionally been how do you sort of manage those entitlements, who can see what, and how do you manage it at scale? So you can comply with ethical requirements, with regulatory requirements, with client expectations without adding a lot of friction to actually working at that organization. We are probably the only content provider that has both these capabilities, the content capability as well as the governance capability, fully meshed and integrated into a single platform. We are introducing, this is not yet available, but it will be available soon, the capability to manage access to agents, based on your outside counsel guidelines. So if a client says, hey, I don't want any of my documents to be analyzed or to be available to an agent, you can prevent that from happening. We are introducing the capability to treat agents like humans and control at a client or a matter level who's got access to it from an agentic perspective.
One other question I wanted to ask is the we talked about MCPs, we talked about integrations. What does that kind of mean in terms of where law firms and legal departments are going in terms of the legal tech market? I mean, do you think for a while it seemed like we were moving toward greater and greater consolidation, and in some ways, all of these integrations, while they provide consolidation, they also seem to foster greater variety of choice, or the ability to use a greater variety of different tools and platforms and connect them in different ways. So I guess my question is, do you think we're moving toward greater consolidation among the products that legal professionals are using, or are we moving toward greater diversity, greater variety?
I'm guessing as much as you here. Or maybe thinking aloud. Uh,
Yeah. Well, thinking of that's
I
okay, but I mean, you see some of this just
yeah,
through how your customers use your platform and what they
yeah,
integrate with.
yeah,
I guess
yeah,
I'm just wondering from your
yeah.
perspective.
I think one of the biggest changes in the last, particularly in the last year, is where LLMs have had a huge, or frontier models have had a huge impact, is the ability to write code, and
Hmm.
and that is going to increase, the amount of software that's just available. And
Hmm.
you'll have not just third party software providers, but even firms that have the ability to build interesting applications that solve very niche problem. So I think in that sense you're going to see more diversity, but I think the platform providers and the frontier model providers are also going to have the ability to consolidate those capabilities over time. So, perhaps we'll see diversity and then we'll see that consolidation, and we're probably in the middle of that cycle right now.
Have you been doing any vibe coding yourself?
You asked me this. This was a question you asked me in the last meeting, and I didn't have a great answer. And I can tell you that at iManage, we have significantly increased the use of AI in a variety of functions, not just coding. And we've seen productivity gains across the board. Whether it's talent acquisition, documentation, training, quality assurance, and writing applications.
Yeah. What about just you personally? Have you played around with it at all, or?
I do. We've sort of standardized on Cloud Cowork, and I use it all the time now.
Yeah. That was all I had. Anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on?
I think we're in very interesting times. It's quite clear that this technology is going to be transformative. The question is, how long is it going to take to actually seep into both the workflow and then sort of the business model? But it's happening, and we are seeing it. I also hope that we pay attention to sort of the human impact of what this technology can, how this technology might impact society, right? If there's an increase in demand for legal services and there's an increase in the capacity, then we're all going to be happy. But the timing of that needs becomes uneven, and that can create disruption. And this is not just for legal, but it's probably for for everything. So that's sort of something that I'd be concerned about. And I think it's important that those of us that are benefiting from the AI wave, pay attention to it and make sure that we bring everyone along, for this ride. So it's fun, not just now, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now.
Yeah, I like that. Well, Neil, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to me.
Always a pleasure talking to you, Bob. And hopefully we'll see you at ELTACON soon.
See you at ELTACON, and I hope you have a good conference over in London. I assume you'll be at that one as well.
Yeah, I'm headed there next week. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Yeah. Take
Safe
care.
travels, and good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments, please do so by messaging us on LinkedIn or other social media, or just email me directly, ambrogi@gmail.com. If you're a fan of LawNext, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. Hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.